Hey, thanks for joining me again. You know, I've recently rediscovered one of my favorite comedy sci-fi classics, Mars Attacks. Now, after watching this, I started thinking, where does a person have to go to maximize your chances to see a UFO? And as long as we're out there, let's look for Bigfoot too. So let's gather up a bunch of sighting data. I'll use all of Esri's tips and tricks and tools that we can find and see if we can maximize our chances of a sighting. Oh yeah, I seen him. Bigfoot, UFO too, when I was out fishing and camping. Here's a map of it. This here Carto-Madness. Yeah. Okay, let's start with a fresh copy of Arc Pro and add our favorite base map, Firefly. I like it because it's kind of desaturated and I like these darker maps. So when it comes in, it's in a projection I don't like, and that central meridians through West Africa. And so we can go ahead and change that quickly by going to properties and coordinate systems and looking for equal Earth. And go down here, we say world and Americas. Be great. And if we do a copy and modify, we've done this before, we can change that central meridian from minus 90 to minus 121.1700, which I instinctively know is right through the western United States. If we apply, we can see, boom, right through the western United States. And we have projection we like a lot better. So now let's go ahead and add our states in. And this one right here is really good. The generalized boundaries for scales like this. So we'll go ahead and add that. And we're going to just do a definition query to get the 4 western states that we want. So quickly, let's go and say we want Washington and Oregon, right field, Oregon, or Idaho, or California. And so now we have our 4 western states, and I want to get rid of Southern California because, you know, that's going to slide into the ocean anyway. So let's cut this off right about from the Bay Area to up to Tahoe area. So I just did the export, and I did a modify on that. And also then I did a merge to get a study area here, just a single boundary. And now we have something to work with. Focus. So let's go ahead and make this boundary pop though and make it an area of interest, shall we? So let's go ahead and copy one of these. And the first one, let's give it a color similar to something in the map, maybe a little lighter, like this green here. And then the rest of them, the next one, let's make it a gradient stroke. And go ahead and make that black to fully transparent black. And we'll take a look. And let's make that a 4 in width and half of that a 2 on offset. And that's we need to flip that a little bit, I think. Yeah, that's better. That's better. Okay. So let's go down here and copy this 2 more times. And we can get the next one, make that 8 width. And the next one, half that is 4. And that looks pretty good. Let's make it accurate and go back and make this one accurate as well. And the last one, let's make that really big, 20. And 10 offset, and now we have a great looking area of interest. So now I think it's time to add a layout. So let's go back to here and add a layout and drop our map into it. Just like this. And we can zoom in to our states boundaries, and we're going to change this scale just to make it just a little bit bigger. Like that, and open our layout and scoot it to where we eventually want it to be, right about there. That looks pretty good. So let's close that activation. And now we need some UFO data. So if we go out to the interwebs and search UFO data, we're going to find that GitHub has a UFO sightings CSV file with lats and longs and everything we need. So let's go ahead and download that. And once we do, we're going to see it in our map, and we can add it to the current map. And we can use a tool. Oops. Use a tool called XY to point. And let's take a look at this really quickly. Let's take a look at this. And we can see that it does indeed have lats and longs, just like we need it. And so we'll go ahead and use that. Now let's drag our table into this box and rename it, our output, to UFO points. And take the rest of the defaults in this tool and run it. And once we do run it, we can see that we have plenty of UFO sightings all over the United States. So, okay, let's get our Bigfoot data now. So back out to the interwebs and Google, and we find that the ArcGIS hub has Bigfoot sightings, and they're even nice enough to make a shapefile out of it for us. So let's go ahead and download that and then add it to our map. And we will see that we now have a whole bunch of Bigfoot sightings as well. Very cool. Okay. So now we want them only to have sightings in our study area. So we'll do a couple of select by locations, and we will export those as their very own shapefiles. In this case, Bigfoot sightings points. And we'll get rid of our original Bigfoot sightings. Some housekeeping. Let's do the same thing with the UFO points. And we will export that as well as its own feature class and call that UFO sightings points. And now we can get rid of the original, and now we have a nice clean study area to work with. Now here's something interesting. There's so many sightings in these urban areas: Seattle, Portland, Bay Area, up here in Spokane, Boise, down the I-80 corridor. But we want to see our sightings by population, sightings per person, if you will. So what we need to do is we need to get some population data. So back out to the bottomless pit of cool data, and we'll look for census blocks. And this is a great data set, but it's huge. So I'm not going to add it to this for demonstration purposes, but I did before, and I selected all of those census blocks that live inside our study area. So I selected those, exported them as their own feature class, and here it is. This is what it looks like, and you can see just in this study area there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of census blocks. So let's zoom in here to the Portland area and take a look and see what a census block looks like really quickly. And so we can select one of them, and we will look at our attribute data over here, and we can find that there's some really good data in here. In this case, we have 21 houses, and 54 people live in those 21 houses in that particular census block. Really good data. But to make it useful for us, we're going to go ahead and turn those from blocks into points. So we will use the great tool called feature to point. And we're going to take our census blocks and make an output feature class called census points, and we need to check the inside box right here, because if those blocks are shaped like an L or some weird shape, that centroid might fall outside of the polygon. So that forces it inside, which is better for us. And we'll go ahead and run that. And once we do, we'll see we have copious amounts of census points now. Perfect. So let's zoom back in and just take a look. And just make sure, sometimes there's probably nobody out there even though it's a census block. So let's go over here, back to an urban area. Yeah, Portland. And let's select one of these and just double check it, because I like to double check along the way some of these things. And we'll look at attributes, and sure enough, we have, in this case, we have a housing count and a population count, which is exactly what we need. Let's zoom out and we get rid of our blocks now. And we have census points. So now that we have all of our points, we want to make some hexagons. Hex bins, as they call them. So let's go ahead and grab that particular tool called Generate Tessellation. And so we want to make those tessellations right in our state's poly only, and we want it to be hexagon. We want it to be a transverse hexagon, because our friend John Nelson says that's the cool way to make hexagons. So if John thinks it's cool, I think it's cool. Now, in previous trial and error, I have determined that 350 square miles is perfect for me for this project. So let's run that, and it doesn't take long to see a bunch of hexagons. Now, we got a whole bunch of them that are outside of our area of interest, so let's go ahead and get rid of those. So, simple, select by location, and we want to invert the relationship to select the ones outside, which we just did. And so we'll go ahead and say we love tessellations of hexagons, but let's get rid of these. We have enough. So as you see now, there's a whole bunch of them, not a whole bunch, but many that barely touch our boundary and are going to kind of throw off our data, I think, a little bit. So let's go ahead and do a manual delete of some of these that are really not going to mean anything and just confuse things in the future, maybe. And take these three as well. Okay. All right. I like that a little better. So now, these hexagons are dumb hexagons. They don't know anything about anything. So let's go ahead and just double check that and select a couple. And look at our attributes. And sure enough, all I know is their length, their area, and their grid ID. Dumb. So we can fill it up. We can smarten those up quite a bit. We want each one to know how many people live in each hexagon. So the next tool we're going to use is going to be Summarize Within. And so this is a fun tool. So let's take our tessellations and drop them in here. And we want to put our census features in the summary. And we're going to say population count, sum. And we'll take the rest of the defaults here and rename this actually Smart Hexagons and say run. That's a pretty long process, so I sped this up significantly. There are a lot of points there and a lot of simple math. So it takes a bit of time, but there we go. We're done. So now let's take a look at our smart hexagons and see just how smart they've turned out to be. Let's try one right here. And sure enough, we have a housing, a count of points, and a population. Exactly what we're looking for. Great. So let's get rid of our original dumb tessellations. And let's copy our smart hexagons because we're going to need two different features here. So let's hold Control and copy, and name one UFO hexagons, and one of them Bigfoot hexagons. So now that we have UFO and Bigfoot hexagons, let's work specifically on our UFO hexagons and make them super smart by joining them, doing a spatial join, and joining them to our view count, which is sightings. So we'll do join it to sightings points and take the defaults and run it. And once we do, we will go here and we will see. Let's see. Let's try this one. Let's double check on this one. So here we have a join count of 110. 110 sightings and a population of 30,000. But 110, I only see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points here. Well, let's select those and just double check and see why that might be. And if we look, if we select this, get our lasso and select it, we will see that, yes, true enough, we have 110 points. Check. Why is that? Well, let's select one, and we can see that some of them, most of them, are stacked. There's a single. There's a stack of 4. So, okay, that checks out. Everything worked as expected. So now we can turn our UFO sightings points off. And now let's start playing with some symbology for UFOs. So we'll go ahead and go to symbology. And let's, well, first of all, let's not delete, but definition query out all of those parcels, hexagons that have 0 sightings. There we go. Those are now only hexagons with sightings. Now we can start playing with our symbology, and we can go to graduated colors, and those are kind of cool, but they are really weird. That's because we're doing it on shape length and not join count. There's join count, and as you expect, Seattle has a lot of Portland, Bay Area has a lot of sightings, Spokane, down here in Boise, along the I-80 corridor. So really, that's not all that accurate because we want sightings per person. Well, that's easily done here. And all we have to do is go over here to normalization and say by population. And that looks a lot more reasonable. Look down here by Crater Lake in the wilds of Idaho. There's some pretty decent sightings up there as far as count goes. Count per person. So that's graduated colors, but let's do graduated symbols. And okay, that's cool, but again, we're in shape length, so let's go back to join count and normalize by population. And let's say a minimum size on this is 10. And the maximum size, let's put a nice big 50. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. That looks pretty cool. So I don't like the circle though. So let's go ahead and go to gallery and go to Firefly symbology, and I'll put the link below. Just get that from Esri. And I like this one. It looks pretty spacey, right? Yeah, that looks like a UFO. Sci-fi. And that's great, but let's also change our hexagon boundaries to something that kind of matches a little bit rather than gray. So we can turn off our solid fill. We don't need that. But our color, yeah, see? It's a little bit bold, so let's dial that back with just a simple transparency of around 65%. And okay, that looks a little bit better, a little more subtle. Pretty good. I like that quite a bit. And so now we look at our layout, and I think that looks really great. So back to our map. Let's turn those off. And now let's work on our Bigfoot. But we don't want our symbology to overlay our nice new sparkly UFO symbols. So let's symbolize this with the outline itself, the hexagon outline itself. So let's go here. So let's begin this with a spatial join to our Bigfoot sightings points. So let's do that spatial join. And 2 points, all good, we'll take it. And now those are smart Bigfoot hexagons. And now let's get rid of those that have 0 sightings. So same thing, definition query, join count is greater than 0. And now we have hexagons with Bigfoot sightings. A lot down there about the Sierra Nevadas. Okay, so let's get rid of our fill because we are not using a fill. We are going to be using our hexagon boundaries. So what we have to do here is, first of all, let's go ahead and copy it and make the second one a gradient stroke. And make that stroke. Let's make these blue. From solid blue to fully transparent blue. Okay, great. And now we have blue hexagon boundaries. That gradient stroke, but we're going to vary that gradient stroke by population, sightings by population, same as we did with UFOs. But we're going to do that a little differently. We're going to allow the data to drive our gradient stroke. And through trial and error, I found that if I do the width first, it will crash the software. Why? I'm not quite sure. Maybe a divide by 0 kind of thing. So we'll do the offset first. And the offset, again, has to be half of our thickness. So let's do our thickness and multiply it by negative 0.5. So, and this is arcade. Don't be afraid. It's really easy and a lot of fun. So let's go on our join count and divide it by our population, which is our normalization, right? Close that. And these are pretty small numbers, so let's multiply that by 25 just so we can see it. And then again, this is our offset, so let's multiply that by negative 0.5. And double check that it's supposed to work and say, okay, yep, okay. And now we have an offset. Okay, it's hard to see here, but they have offset themselves. And we use the negative to be inside our polygon instead of outside. So now let's do our width, and it's this very same formula minus the multiply by negative 0.5. So let's go ahead and open a parentheses here. Do our join count divided by population. So our normalization, sightings by per person, if you will. Check that, it's good. Looks good. And now we can see that we have some gradients on our hexagons. Looking pretty good. In Nevada, or not Nevada, that's Idaho. Down there by Crater Lake. Up here in the Olympic National Forest, hotspot. And Mount Adams, also very hot for Bigfoot sightings. Mount St. Helens used to be really populated, but ever since the Mountain Blue in 1980, it kind of wiped out the population, it seems like. So they've all moved over to Mount Adams. So there we go. We have Bigfoot sightings and UFO sightings in the same map. How cool is that? That's fun, huh? Now let's look down here by Eastern Oregon. Here's Crater Lake. And wow, maybe there's a base there, huh? Some Bigfoots next door, neighbors out there in Eastern Oregon. Again, out here in the wilds of Idaho. Looking great. Okay. So now let's work on our map aesthetics a little bit, and let's add a polygon. And this is, I don't like boxes or boundaries or borders so much, but I do like vignettes. These are super cool. So let's add a vignette to this map. I'm going to make it a gradient fill, and rectangular, and continuous, and 100% of our box. And flip that, and we're getting closer. So let's go ahead and make that gradient though from black, and let's just make it solid black for a little ways in from the border. And that next transparency, about 30. And then let's do the same here and make the center completely transparent. And we're going to have to monkey with this a little bit later, but let's go ahead and play with it now. Let's go with black, fully transparent black. And this one as well, fully transparent black. There we go, say okay. And all right, that's giving it a little bit of atmosphere. It's a little too dark, but I think we can work with that in a little bit. See, with vignette, without, a little too dark. So we will add. Let's add global background from the Living Atlas. This is, if you don't know about this one, it's super handy. And it's just a square that covers the planet. But you can do a lot of things with it. And here it is. So let's move it down just above our base map of Firefly. And let's make that completely white. Okay. And then let's go ahead and go to a transparency. Let's make a transparency a little bit. And that's great, but actually it's not great. So let's throw a blend mode on that of overlay. And that way we can lighten it up and still see all the detail underneath. And that's a lot better. I like that. I like it. So pretty good. And now just adding a few fun bits, some pictures, some text. We get a super cool, silly map of Bigfoot and UFOs. But yeah, there's a big sighting there by Tahoe. So let's, I'm not quite satisfied with that yet. So let's go back here and mess with our vignette a little bit and change our gradient fill. And let's dial this border back a little bit. And our center transparency. There we go. That's better. Now we're talking. Now we have a good map. Also, let's put our state boundaries back in there. So let's change this to black. Black state boundaries. Pretty good. And make it a little wider. 1 1/4. That's better. Now we have some state boundaries. And there you have it. Where to go camping to see UFOs or Bigfoot, or maybe both if you go by Mount Adams or down by Crater Lake. Hey, thanks for checking it out. See you next time. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Bye.